when I started farming here in the early 70s, and in the winter, after a good snowstorm, the snow was all black. And of course, what we found over time is that farmers have really become more sensitized to that, and have tried to protect that soil in the winter time. We always think that the soil is frozen up in the winter, it's not going to blow, but it's amazing how it keeps sort of breaking loose even though the ground is frozen. And so keeping the soil covered in the winter, I think, is critical. It's also critical in the springtime. If you have a heavy snow in the winter and you get a quick thaw in the spring, you can have quite a bit of water erosion. And sometimes, and I think it happened here about 3 or 4 years ago, during that thaw period, we had some significant rainfall. And so you just double the amount of water that's flowing across that ground. And it's a unique situation in the spring versus the summer. Because in the spring, as the water is flowing across the ground is thawing out as well. The frost is going out, so the water is moving the soil even as the soil is becoming frost-free. And it's amazing how much erosion happens in the spring because of that. A couple, 2-3 years ago, you could see it in many areas. The other thing is, in the spring, your ground is still frozen a lot of times, and so the water runs over the top instead of having the opportunity to soak down. Whereas if you got cover, if you got residue on top, at least you're protecting it to a certain extent, and minimally perhaps, but keeping the ground from freezing quite as deeply, and it might take in a little bit more moisture than it would otherwise, but I think that would be quite minimal. But the big thing is, and it's an objective that I've had for many years, is I want as much residue on top at all times as possible. And my father actually taught me that at an early age, because and I've told the story many times. I think it was back in 1945. He had just started farming over on the farm, and I should tell you that straight across, as your camera is shooting, that large grove of trees, right on the other side of that is the farm that I grew up on. But anyway, my father, an implement dealer from Madison, came out one day and he said, "We've got this 10-foot Graham Hammy chisel plow. You want to try it?" And my dad, I guess, and that's what I picked up, he always willing to try something, He said yes, he would. And that was the beginning of the use of the chisel plow in western Minnesota. It took about 20 years, but eventually everybody converted to chisel plowing. You see very little, if any, moldboard plowing today in western Minnesota. And that has really contributed to a decrease in soil erosion, especially in the winter months, because it keeps the residue on top where it protects the soil rather than turning it up and exposing it to the winds and the rain.